Hi, hello, and welcome to Cloud Security Azure Fundamentals. I am Hari Shekhar, and I usually go by the name Harry. Just to give you a summary of what has happened, this is a six-part series. Of course, the good news is the five parts are over, and I'm at the last one. I will be running you through on Azure Fundamentals, and this is on the theme of identity access management and cybersecurity. So just in case if you have missed out on the earlier parts, please just put a comment on the chat window, or you can email us at the prescribed email address, or email me at harry@manageengine.com, and we will ensure that we give you the recordings. And of course, please keep your questions coming on the chat window. And I sincerely hope and pray that the content that we've provided so far was informative. And I hope, cross fingers, that my content that I'm about to show you all today gives you some key information on how you can protect your cloud security as well. Since, of course, walking in the last, of course, you study patterns, you understand what the attendees need. Most of them, in fact, most have asked for the hybrid setup. So I have tailor-made my deck accordingly, but the premise is going to be on cloud security, focusing more on Azure Active Directory. Again, that's my email address, harry@manageengine.com. Be it a thought, comment, feedback, please feel free to drop a line, and I will ensure that you get answers, or we can work together to ensure that we address security, which is the need of the hour. All right. So for people who are walking in for the first time, welcome. For people who have already been a part of my talk, I sincerely hope again that the content is informative. Without further ado, let's get started. The agenda, what do I have in store for you? Of course, the lined up speakers who did the first five parts, Vivin, Sharda, and few others, they would have streamlined the identity access part. And of course, a couple of them would have touched the on-prem security. But today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first kickstart running through the basics of Azure and its limitations. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because I've done earlier cloud security webinar on Azure. So you could, in case if you're interested in beefing up your security and what is baselines and how to go about setting up logging and setting up how to notice what's happening in Azure, just ask for that recording and we would gladly give it to you. But I'm just going to run through that. And second is I'm going to run through Azure Security Center, which is now undergone a name change. Most of you would be knowing this. So please use the chat window to comment. And of course, we can take this interactive. I know this is a one-way talk where I give you information and you all get to see what I talk and show. But if I would have loved to do this in respective environment, but due to the COVID restrictions, travel is still not there yet. So hopefully soon I get an opportunity to be talking in front of you all. But till then, keep the chat window, and that to me is kind of keeping it interactive. And security alerts it provides, and then covering the gaps in Azure security and steps to implement ATP, Advanced Threat Protection. All of this is part of the package that you have, not for people who are using it for free. I'm sorry to break that live right now, but if you're using the hybrid setup, how could you go about setting the Advanced Threat Protection? And last but not the least is how could ManageEngine Log360, which is ManageEngine's integrated SIEM solution, could help you out solve all of the problems that I'm about to address. But the key takeaway is the problems. The problems around IT security, cybersecurity are real across geography. Languages might be different, but please ensure that the problems that I'm going to discuss today you have answers for them, especially. So I would like to kickstart my talk with three specific points before I run through the basics of the importance of cybersecurity. Microsoft themselves have mentioned that attackers are using in Azure three major features which are being abused or taken into confidence, and they go ahead breaking organization. You've got custom script extension. So this feature is used to download and execute scripts on Azure virtual machines. And then you've got VM access extensions. This application is used for creating new administrator accounts, resetting the password in existing and built-in administrator accounts, and resetting remote desktop service configuration as well. So attackers are using this application to gain initial access to Azure platform with elevated privileges and to evade detection. And last but not the least is anti-malware extension. So this free real-time protection extension helps Azure to identify and remove uh, viruses, spywares, and other malicious software. And attackers are using this feature to disable the real-time protection before loading susceptible tools or to exclude infected files from their detected machine or kind of taking it away so that they go unnoticed. So of course, when I kickstarted my talk with these three important points, many of you running the hybrid setup, you know where I'm getting at, right? It's called the living of the land attack, where if you feed through a phishing attack, ending up in ransomware, and in between is where PowerShell or command line is used, and then the first line of defense is stopped. The attackers try to evade or stop these first line of defense, because if the first line of defense is stopped or prevented from doing what it's supposed to do, then where will the anomaly raise? Where will the trigger or alerts come out? Because the first lines have been stopped, they erase the logs. So this is the key critical functionality. Of course, with native technology, there are limitations, but let's get started. Top concerns for CEOs across the globe, right? In 2020, when the pandemic started and the world came to a stall, cyber threats was at the number fourth position at 33%. And this was one of the top concerns back then as well, but fourth position, still not there yet. So that is at a whooping 33%. And in 2021, it has climbed up, it's got pace with just limited amount of time, it's gained pace and crawled up to the second spot, which is gaining the attention. So top CEOs, executives, IT security professionals, anyone trying to beef up security is now battling it out on protecting their organization. Of course, the source is embedded on every single slide, so please give it a read. And this is just to ensure that cybersecurity is the need of the hour. And of course, if you want to protect your brand image, if you want to protect your customer information, your own employee information, brand value, you need to beef up cybersecurity. Of course, this talk will give you some native conditions as well, recommendations of your native technology, but that comes in with the loopholes that native technology presents to every single organization, right? So let's get going. Azure security defaults. I said I'll run through the basics. Of course, I will show you a little bit around, but the point here is when we deal with security defaults, if you have only Azure, this is the starter kit for security. It comes in with limitations, but it's great to have. If you're on a hybrid setup, you know this is a lot better to what you have on the on-prem. On the on-prem, you've got group policy objects, which is great. I'm not saying no, but it's extremely difficult to strengthen or beef up your security with just only GPOs. For instance, password control, still relying on weak password protocols. You can do fine-grained password policy. If you're having the hybrid setup, you can write back. But if it's just on-prem, I'm comparing here for the Azure setup or Office 365 setup. So all it does is all users to register for Azure AD multi-factor authentication requires administrators to perform multi-factor authentication. So it blocks legacy authentication protocols. It requires user to go ahead and do multi-MFA whenever necessary, and protects privileged identity access like Azure portal. I'll get to that in just a quick second. But the point here is when we say MFA, it will only allow the free version with Microsoft Authenticator. But of course, if you want to go advanced conditional access, beefing up security through multi-factor, through OTP, through email, through n number of authentications like multi-factor, that comes in with a paid licensing. So this is what is available on the free. Of course, feel free to check out the source link. And there are a few recommendations And that is where I'm going to kickstart my talk today, right? Cloud policies might not be as secure as we think. Example, when we were given the keys to the kingdom of Azure, this admin page through Admin Center, one can access it, but you can restrict it. Only administrators could have the privilege of accessing it, or you have the option of allowing this to be open for all users. So the choice is yours. So what it does is when you put this to no, meaning anybody can access this page, it allows users to view target-rich information on Azure. Not many of them have taken full control or full leverage of this particular setting in Azure user settings page, right? And LinkedIn accounts, it exposes your sensitive email in LinkedIn. Your Azure email addresses will surface on LinkedIn if this particular LinkedIn account connection is enabled. And on the right, very, very important, small buttons, but gives you a lot of information. Example, users are allowed to invite guest users from other networks to view data. So guest user permissions are limited, where you go ahead. So in Azure, to collaborate and get work done faster, a user who's not a part of the domain or the particular organization can invite others as guests, and they can still collaborate on that specific resource. So you need to know who has such access, and from there, if anybody is giving consent, if anybody is going ahead and sharing information to others, you need to know who they are. So these are all critical controls, just in case if we overlook. All it takes is just about 5 minutes to get these things into place. But please ensure that you know what is happening in your infrastructure. Just a yes or a no might even break or make your organization, right? So all these policies are default in Azure Active Directory. But this is just not it. You could even give them where normal users could spin up a custom application at the back end, could map it to Azure AD and start collecting information from your own organization. So all of this is a part of the user settings. So please give this a good read and possibly get to know, in case if anybody has, you need to know who has what rights. And of course, if this is yes or a no, that will set the baseline for your organization, right? So what I wanted to kickstart here is when we focus on restrict access to PowerShell. So what I wanted to show you all is just, of course, you can follow it up with me. You could go ahead into user settings, app registration, or administration portal. When you go forward the mouse on the information icon at the bottom, there are two lines which are very important, but does not restrict such access using PowerShell or other clients such as Visual Studio. So what happens here is, in order to touch Azure, I could quickly go ahead and open up PowerShell, and I can connect to a specific client. I don't even need a web browser, so I could log in through Shell. But the reality is shell-based login by default cannot be captured. I'm not sure how many of you love sitting through logs, but this is the primary concern. So what you need to do is, if any user goes ahead and logs in using Shell, the important factor here is by default, it cannot be identified. And there are many ways by which a user can log into Azure Active Directory. And this is just one off example. So right here, let me go back to my deck. And this is where your native technology is not helping you out. Of course, the information is being held, but not to the way that you want, right? So what we have done is, in our signature solution, if you are interested or if you have a SIEM solution, you could find out which application is used to log into Azure. Is it Azure Portal, or is it PowerShell, or is it Office 365 Shell, or is it a Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance Center, or is it a custom application? All of this is documented and given to you right in front of your eye. So this is essential as we are in 2021, especially if you're a hybrid setup. You can find out a specific report called hybrid logon activity just on the screen. The fifth one onto your eye on the left, hybrid logon activity, which will focus on on-prem, which will also focus on cloud and tell you who is doing what. The most essential, the first line of attack can be noticed if you have a strong parameters of judging who is logging in from where, not just on on-prem, even on your cloud. And that is what we are after. So this is AD Audit Plus, which is a part of Log360. But the key problems here is, are you monitoring how he or she is logging into your hybrid setup, right? I promised I will touch Azure Security Center. Here we go. Now it's called Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So Azure Security Center and Azure Defender are now called as Defender for Cloud, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. The enhanced security features are free for the first 30 days, of course. When you get it for free, but when you tip off the 30-day mark, you've got only two things that will happen in your environment: continuous assessment and security recommendations, and it will give you secure score. But it does not help you with the hybrid setup. It does not give you just-in-time virtual machine access, no adaptive application controls and network hardening, and regulatory compliance dashboard and reports are not applicable to you all if you tip off the 30-day mark. No threat protection for Azure virtual machines and non-Azure servers, and threat protection for supported PaaS services. Platform as a service is also not available. So for 30 days, yes, you get to enjoy all of this. But again, the point here is you need to know what's happening. So of course, that is a paid service. But of course, if you love it, you go ahead and pay up. It depends on the feature set that you need, geography that you're bound to. All of this will open up even EDR, where you could get more information on Azure virtual machines, non-Azure servers, threat protection for PaaS servers, just-in-time VM access. All of this is a part of your security center, but on the paid version. I even promised I will focus on security alerts and incidents. So basically for people who are new to security alerts, security alerts are triggered by advanced detections and are available only with enhanced security features enabled. Let's take one step back. I'll even give you an example. Domain admins, 5-time login failures. An alert is thrown up. So that is basically notifying the respective people or group of people, hey, this has happened to one of your privileged user. So for that is alerting. So security alerts is from predefined reports or predefined filters. If that tips off, you get an alert notification. And incidents is, of course, registering them and taking action as and when incidents are being set up into an organization. So that is where you need security orchestration, automation, response. And last but not the least, the most important thing across the cloud is log retention. Again, that is not for free. The earlier webinar or the basic 101, where I did talk about cloud security, Azure Essentials, that will tell you 30-day, 90-day logs. And after that, you need to pay up to store your own logs. So that is, again, an additional paid service. So even for Defender for Cloud, provides detailed steps to remediate attacks. But again, it's only retained for 90 days. And after that, all of it is additional service. Of course, that is the business for Microsoft. But the point here is, how could we help you all out? Because you have on-prem, you have Azure. So the logging retention is one of the most important and the most difficult things to get around, because in on-prem, logs don't replicate. It's 4 GB, theoretical 300, practical 300, theoretical 4 gig, and logs don't replicate. On-prem, you have multiple endpoints. Looking into all of these log sets is extremely difficult. Of course, you've got custom views. And on the other side, when you move into Azure, for the same amount of users, you just can't take things for granted. So over here, the logs need to be stored at a central repository for 30 to 90 days. And after that, you have to pay up to store your own data. For this, how could we help you out is through Log360 on-prem, where all of these data are stored within your four walls, and you could go back in time, look up. It gives you real time for on-prem Active Directory and for your Azure through your tenant. As soon as the logs have hit the server, we would start giving you notification alerts and reporting on what's happening in your Azure infrastructure, right? So this is the key essential, one of the key essential for a SIEM solution. And this is where log management comes into picture. So what we have done is through AD Audit Plus, we bought the on-prem and Azure Active Directory together to ensure it's all under one roof, right? So key problem for hybrid, for most of the organization running hybrid, same amount of users, potentially data from on-prem move to cloud. How are you protecting it? So you've got Windows Server Active Directory, you've got SQL, Azure AD Connect Server, and from there, touching cloud, which could be Azure AD, Office 365, or any other SaaS application. So you've got three fundamental things to worry about, which is the ADDS connector account, AD Sync Service account, and Azure AD connector account. So the connection between your traditional on-premise AD and Azure is most crucial. And the security of your network depends on this, because ADDS used to read and write information on-prem. AD Sync service used to run the synchronization service and read-write data to SQL database. And Azure AD Connect account used for ongoing synchronizations with Azure. So it is essential that you pay attention to the connection between on-prem and cloud, because your AD users to Azure, you sync your AD users to Azure, passwords also get synced. And when patch the hash is configured, that specific account shares the password hash from on-prem to the cloud. So when you go ahead, look into the slide, the image on the left and right tells you they've got replicating directory changes all. And when they have this specific functionality, passwords get replicated, and attackers attempt to access on-premise servers where Azure AD Connect is hosted. And because the connector account has special replicating privileges, the password attack also happens, and the Azure logs do not record activities happening on premise. So that's exactly the attention that we need to pay. We need to ensure all of these hidden features needs to be understood really well for pass the hash. And that goes with the baseline of how you have set up your hybrid Active Directory, right? So few recommendations, as I promised, with the native technology that everybody has. Follow best practices for Active Directory, limit administrative rights on workstations, and restrict access to PowerShell, restricting access to critical resources like domain controller, file server, member server, who's got what access to what level. And you should also take into consideration of local administrators, privileged users, all of it. You need to know who they are, understanding vulnerabilities and configuration, and patching and system configurations. All of this is not the answers for protecting your on-premise AD, but these are all good checkpoints to kickstart your cybersecurity strategy. And moving into Azure, everything that was not mentioned on security defaults fall in line with Azure AD recommendations, but all of this is a part of P1, P2 licensing, not on the free version, except the first point where you can restrict access to administration portal. You can deploy Azure MFA, then you've got conditional access, you can protect your Azure Connect server, secure score, and deploy privileged identity management. So these are recommendations for native platforms that you have for on-prem and Azure AD. And if with all of this available, why is maintaining IT security still not simple yet, right? So that is the key point. So let's focus on the least privilege. I did this mistake. So that's exactly why I am educating you all on Office 365 for a simple user provisioning, deprovisioning. I gave it a global admin account, which was unnecessary until I stumbled upon this specific slide or resource from Microsoft. So what they said is this is sufficient for that specific role. So for instance, create users, delete users, user administrator is sufficient. Whereas when you focus on global administrator, the only thing on this specific requirement is invalid refresh tokens of privileged admins. So that is essential. But for other things, you don't need to give a global admin. So this is basically hand walking people with just enough access that is required to do that specific role. And on the other side, for Azure AD, you've got role-based access control, where you can focus on security principle, role definition, scope of resources. But to enhance that feature, Azure now gives you AD Identity Governance Suite, where you've got governance, identity lifecycle, access lifecycle, and you can even secure privileged access. But again, that is not for free. I'm just giving you what best could be done with whatever you all have, right? And on-premise, the key problems in discussion today for Azure and on-prem: log size limitation. And again, on the Azure, log retention limitation, multiple logs to be monitored, reporting and correlation is missing, activity sign-in security logs, and again, reporting and correlation. Why can't things be streamlined in order to fail-proof or go ahead and protect your infrastructure, right? So Office 365 attack, for people who are saying you don't need Defender for cloud for 30 days, and after that you don't, of course, there's no reporting or you don't get what you need. Everything gets documented in logs, but not to the eye. Office 365 mailbox was compromised. Many of you know this. I don't have to rub it back in, but the key point here is the attack was after enabling MFA. So there are 3 points to be noticed. It could be a brute force attack, poor username, poor password again and again and again, or it could be failed MFA attempt multiple times, punching in the OTPs, or just acting as if I am that specific user and intercepting message, but sometimes just not getting it right. Or it could be a shell attack, could be a PowerShell or a remote PowerShell attack. So that is why you need to ensure that it is essential to understand what is happening. So these are all 3 simple patterns to know what attack it is. But the problem here is you don't get to know them because there's no off-the-shelf reporting. And that is exactly where AD Audit Plus out of Log360 now tells you for your on-prem Azure Office 365, it was a brute force, or if it was a remote shell activity, failed MFA login attempt, everything is tracked and you get an email, but you just don't stop there. So on the specific alert that you're seeing, you've got alert actions, which is email notification, SMS notification, execute script. So you could execute your own script in case if certain things happen in your infrastructure, be it business hour, non-business hour. You can trigger scripts and those scripts can take action and mitigate the operation as well. So you don't have to wait for people to know what is happening. If this happens, you can go ahead and set up a workflow as well through scripts. And of course, through Log360, we give you workflow techniques where you can set up patterns. If this happens, let's just go about bringing in the remaining actions as well. Disable Active Directory user, going ahead and disabling them, and a lot of other functionalities, right? And then notifying your incident management system, your ITSM ticketing tool, and getting to give the security 360 feed about what is happening in your infrastructure, right? Few more important use cases: Azure AD joint devices. So when, of course, through Azure, when you're joining in Windows 10 machines and above, any user who is a device administrator by default becomes a local admin for all Azure AD joint devices. And if you search for this role in roles and administrators, the specific view in the menu in Azure portal, you will not find it. And you need adding device administrator is done in a different way. You need to go to device settings, where you'll find an option as additional local administrator on Azure AD joint devices. So you need to know who's got what access to what level. And a small loophole here could give unprecedented access where they could go ahead and add Windows 10 and above machines onto your Azure network without your knowledge as well. So pay attention on who's got these rights, right? Hybrid logon details, as I promised, through Active Directory, I could log in through Azure AD Web Portal, a command line interface, any other application supported by Azure M365, Skype for Business, Teams, etc. So it is important to secure and monitor logons. As I showed you before, the importance of hybrid logon details, knowing if it was login failure or login using on-premise passwords, guest accounts redemption pending, tried logging in using old passwords, expired passwords, newly created weak passwords. Everything is being paid attention to. And you even get to know logon failed due to conditional policy, due to device conditional policy on disabled application. Password contains username. So we are giving you that granularity of understanding a possible attack pattern and how to protect your infrastructure, right? Securing virtual networks in Azure. And why am I talking about this is Microsoft did predict the top three features that are being abused by attackers, are being used by attackers as we speak. And that is why I wanted to talk about securing virtual networks. There is a VM that is also such as Azure Virtual Machines, because VNet enables many types of Azure resources, such as virtual machines to securely communicate with each other, the internet, and even on-premise Active Directory. So from a security standpoint, it is critical to ensure only the authorized users and groups have access to virtual networks on Azure, because any user with the below privileges, which I'm about to read, or on the slide, on the VNet has the ability to add, connect new devices on the subnet and change and manage the subnet range, modify the connections, and even grant other user access to VNet, right? So this is essential that we pay attention to virtual networks on who is doing what. And that's exactly the need for a SIM to understand virtual networks, who has what access. If anybody is being granted for any specific access, you should be notified and action should be taken immediately, because the consequence, if added, could be huge, right? Now, we've spoken about logins, we've spoken about attacks, different types of attacks, then we've spoken about VNet that will help you connecting virtual machines in Azure through internet, through the Active Directory. And then we've even spoken about the hybrid logon scenes, and then Azure AD devices, joint devices. So with the time that I have, I'm trying to give you all possible scenarios, but I would not be justifying this specific talk if I don't talk about users, because there are many ways a user could get their work done through on-prem Active Directory. They could touch the domain and then jump onto Azure, or simply just logging onto the Office 365 client without touching the domain, right? Or jump into Azure Active Directory. They might be field officers and still they could get work done. So in such cases, how will you know what he or she is doing with their endpoints, with their applications? How get to know if they're installing any applications? This is not just for cloud setup, this is for your on-prem. You need to know if there are any registry entry changes, if there are any specific changes done to the endpoints. Of course, on-premise group policy object restricts files, when I say files, applications from being installed or being used on endpoints. If you are taking full effect of that, kudos to you. But if people are hearing it for the first time, yes, through group policy object, you can enable conditions that only certain applications can go ahead and can be used on endpoints. So please give that a good read. And if that is not set, you need to ensure that you're monitoring all of the endpoints. So this is the hawk eye view of IT security, the connecting points, users, or rather endpoints, because they click on files. They are the easiest gateway to an organization, or the weakest link to an organization. Bring in known, unknown, and mysterious attacks. So this is exactly where I'm going to break it down. So what happens if Steve, Noah, John, Rick each from respective departments know what's happening in the organization, and they start logging into source code repository, downloading multiple files, logging into 10 different machines at the same time and installing applications and accessing the internal payroll database. How are you tracking all of this information? So this is exactly where we have introduced machine learning, the first step towards artificial intelligence, to study user behavior. And uh, all you just need to do is feed in the information through AD Audit Plus or through Event Log Analyzer, which is a part of Log360, which I will run through in just a couple of seconds or minutes. And what that does is it draws baseline. It tells you which user is doing what, time count and pattern, peer-to-peer, peer grouping, and seasonal anomalies to ensure it is just not a one tip off point, to basically draw a definite baseline about user behavior study. And through that study, any deviations are flagged, user scores are predicted, and we even tell you through an alert to predict you this is happening. And through the risk score, you can even find out what is going to happen as well, right? So this is a part of UEBA, which is user entity behavior analysis. It draws baseline, and any deviations or anomalies are flagged and gives you analytics as well. So this is Log360, and let me give you a quick run through on how Log360 would look. This is how Log360 would look on the eye, and you could go ahead and check it out for yourself on the online version that we have, log360 demo.manageengine.com, and you could go ahead and see what this solution can do for you. So this is AD Audit Plus. I've got Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, all ready-made templates reporting, and you can go ahead, click on reports and find out what's happening, all ready-made available. And of course, you can customize it the way you want. This is for the on-prem that I promised. You've got permission changes. Let me go into Azure. User logon reports, role management, user management. You've got device management, as I promised. Recently enabled devices, added device configuration, added users to devices, application management, who's given consent, recently consent to application, license management, everything is tracked. Dashboard on the eye. And when you jump into the Log360 module, you've got UBA, which is your user entity behavior analysis, which sets baseline. And for this, all you need to do is download Log360, and you can spin it up in no time. It will study user behavior for the first few days if you're just doing it for the first time, if you're installing it. And from there, you get risk score anomalies on the eye. You can find out who is doing what. Why is the score to at a 56, insider threat, data exfiltration, compromised accounts, and logon anomalies. Everything is available, and all you just need to do is go ahead, get into alerts, and see what we can offer. This is just not for your on-prem, this is for your cloud as well. Go into reports, anomaly reports, cloud services. You've got AWS, Google, and Azure. You can find out who is doing what. This is through machine learning. And of course, last but not the least is our integrated SIEM, which is the event log analyzer, life beyond Windows, which is routers, firewall. Everything can be put into perspective. All of the logs could be brought under Log360. And from there, your compliance, your search, your correlation, everything is taken care of. You've got ready-made templates on brute force right here on the screen. User account threats, brute force, or any VPN logon failures, ransomware attack, file integrity threats, cryptocurrency, group management, potential network threats, everything is taken care of. You've got ready-made templates, and you can even go ahead and build your very own alert as well. So you could go ahead, create correlation rule, and it's just drag and drop. So this is for your entire infrastructure. And since I am pressed for time, I wanted to give you all a resource on Azure Security 101. That link will give you a specific deck on how to beef up your Azure security. And reach out to me for any thought, comment, feedback. I hope that the content was informative. For further information or taking this over a call or anything that we can be of help, drop me an email at harry@manageengine.com. And until next time, please keep well. And here's wishing you an advanced new year. Cheers and have a great day. Bye bye.